If you want a really interesting life, don't say why, say why not. Why not got me a wonderful job in the film business. It got me across the Atlantic. It got me to the North Pole. It's got me through life when I didn't think I could get through life. What happens if she doesn't manage to do it? If she fails? I don't think she knows there's a word called fail in the dictionary. The thing is, I was never racing against people. I was racing against myself and against my fears. And when I got to that North Pole, it wasn't because I got to the North Pole. It's because I'd overcome the discomfort, the fear, and the cold. That's what I was proud about, and did it with my son.
Welcome to another exciting episode of the Thought Leader Revolution. I'm your host, Nikki Balloon. Boy, do we have an exciting guest lined up for you today. Today's guest is a multiple Guinness World Record holder. This is a woman who's absolutely fearless. She has done some wild and crazy and unbelievable stunts of physical prowess. She has raced to the North Pole. She has rowed across the ocean in a rowboat. I am speaking, of course, of none other than the one, the only, the legendary Jan Meek. Welcome to the show, Jan.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And that's only half of the things I've done.
That's true. That's true. So, Jan, you and I got to know each other through the great Raymond Aaron when you did that incredible race to the North Pole. Raymond did it at the same time, and I was his fitness coach. I helped prepare him for that. So here was this fat, doughy, out of shape businessman who decided he was going to do the world's toughest race. And he said, get me into shape. It took us 2 years, but we did it. And in 2 years, the man went to the North Pole. He came back safely. But he always told me about the incredible woman who inspired him to do it because she was doing it too. And, you know, Raymond considered himself a bit of a man's man. And he thought that, hey, if a feminine, girly woman like you could do it, then he has no excuses. But I understand from Raymond that you've done a heck of a lot more than just that phenomenal race. So the people that listen to this show, they tend to be, you know, the type of folks who are entrepreneurs. They're the men and women who have the courage to dream and to go out there and make their dreams come true. They listen to me every week. They want to listen to you. They want to learn from you because they want to be inspired by you. And they want to take some of the tips, tricks, and strategies you have to offer to help them become the best version of themselves in their life and their business. But before they can do that, they got to fall in love with who you are. So tell us your backstory. How'd you get to be the great Jan Meek?
Well, it started off being sent to boarding school at 4 years old. And my mum said to me, just remember, dear, and all the nuns look like penguins, you remember? One piece of advice she gave me is, girls don't cry. So that was the start. Then I used to, and the very first day at boarding school, the girl in front of me was speaking in line, and the nun slapped me, thinking it was me. And I remember holding my fists, thinking, big girls don't cry. Then a few years later, I visited my grandfather who lived in Sweden every year for my summer holidays, unaccompanied. And he used to take me sailing in the Baltic. And he said to me, I'm going to give you two pieces of advice. One is always ask why. You must know what's going on all around you. But if you want a really interesting life, don't say why, say why not.
I love it.
And why not got me when I was young. Shall we go scrumping? Shall we take a day off school? Why not? But why not got me a wonderful job in the film business. It got me across the Atlantic. It got me to the North Pole. It's got me through life when I didn't think I could get through life. Because you put your shoulders back, you're a big girl, you don't cry, and you say, why not?
I love it. I love it. You're an inspiration to men and women everywhere. And I got to tell you, I'm kind of blown away that you've set all these Guinness World Records. So what made you decide to set your very first Guinness World Record? Tell me the whole story.
Right. Well, my husband, it was my second husband. My first husband, I married at 17. There was no pill. When you wanted to be naughty, you got married, right? And we had 20 years, two beautiful children, and we didn't call it a failed marriage. We called it a 20-year marriage. I then met my next husband, who I adored beyond all. And at the age of 47, he got cancer and he died.
Oh.
And I was gutted, absolutely gutted. I could not believe it. I was gutted. I had to carry on with our business. I then sold our business. I then did something which I haven't got a Guinness World Record for, but I took a late gap year and I went to China in 94 on my own.
Wow.
I can tell you that that's a story of its own, probably harder than rowing across the Atlantic. And when I came back, before I went, I was a mayor of my town. I was chairman of the Chamber of Commerce. I was crazy. Everyone used to say, oh, poor Jan, her husband died. I got back a stone lighter. My growing grey hair was now blonde and I was tanned, and it wasn't poor Jan, it was lucky cow, look at her. One day my son rang me up. He was at the Royal Academy training to be an officer. And he said, Mum, how would you like to spend Christmas in Barbados? Whoa, certainly. Just one snag, Mother. We've got to row there in a 23-foot wooden rowing boat. I've joined us in the first and longest race ever. Well, you know the family motto. Why not? I had rowed across a thing called the Serpentine in London when I was about 8 of my rowing. So I went to a, rather like Raymond came to you, I went to my local gym and said, I have a challenge. My challenge is rowing the Atlantic. Yours is getting me fit enough. And like Raymond, in 2 years, every morning, an hour on the rowing machine, lots of weights, getting strong. At the end of 2 years, I also, how clever was my son? Who raised all the money? Who got the boat built? Mum, he's not stupid, was he? While he was training to fight for Queen and country, I raised all the money. And when I arrived in Tenerife, I think it's only then that I realized just what I got into. The other rowers were Marines, paras. There were 2 women married to Marines and paras. They were all much, much younger than me. And here was I, the oldest, smallest, and least experienced. Some of them were very kind to me, and some of them took out a bet. Would I love 2 days, 2 hours? Well, nobody was going to win that bet. If anything spurred me on, that was the extra element I needed. And also, Daniel had been given 3 months off. I had got money from the army because I went along to see them, dressed rather nice, Dad, because Danny was away, to see if they would lend me some money. And the remarks I got back from one of the general was, I think Miss Meek using her sexuality on us. And one of them said, yes, rather nice, wasn't it? The other one said, well, what happens if she doesn't manage to do it, if she fails? And another one said, I don't think she knows there's a word called fail in the dictionary. So we set off on this day in October. And you know why you go in October? It's non-hurricane season.
That makes sense.
And we set off, and we made 101 days it took us, and we experienced everything. We experienced the calm that I would call late Atlantic. We saw dawns and sunsets and night skies where there wasn't room to put even one more star. We saw the most beautiful things. We also saw whales, sharks, and a force 9 gale. Apparently, according to the statistics, force 9 is about 50 foot. The only argument Daniel and I had was he said, I don't think they are 50 foot, Mum. I said, all right, 35, 40. They're big. They're big. And the only good thing about force 9 gales is we were averaging about 25, 30 miles a day on a good day. But during those storms, we were doing 50 and 60 miles. Thank the Lord, towards Barbados. And somebody said to me, were you scared? Not to be frightened out in the Atlantic in a 23-foot boat would be very foolish. And every night, and I had lost my faith when my husband died, I remember going, thanks a bunch, and I stopped praying. During the force 9 gale, I said, hi, it's me. I'm back. I don't want to die. And I started saying the Lord's Prayer. And when I got to, for thine is the kingdom, power, and that summed up that ocean. When we got to Barbados, the sweet, nice thing, you can imagine how close Daniel and I got. I said to him at the end of it, because during the night, I would relive the cancer and all the dreadful things that happened. I would go through them again. And when we got to Barbados, I said to my son, I think I've managed to come to terms and let go of Keith. And his answer was, no, Mum, perhaps he has let go of you. And from the moment I arrived in Barbados and met Raymond, now look, had I known, I might have rowed a bit faster. From the moment I arrived there, I began to heal. And I realized once more that life is good. life is worth living. And my why not meant that my whole life changed. Goodness me, I was even invited to speak in Canada, 2 speaking ones, one on the Royal Atlantic and then the next one. And that's what I did with Raymond. When I told him what I was doing, he said, oh my gosh. I said, well, why don't you come with me, Raymond, in front of all his people? Well, what could he say? But why not?
You know what? You taught him an important lesson. You taught him an important lesson. He considered that to be one of the more seminal experiences of his life. You know, it truly transformed him to do that. He went from being this pudgy executive who was, you know, successful, a good businessman, but let's face it, a physical weakling, to becoming a physical beast at the age of 62, you know, and
I was also 62.
There you go. And he took himself from being a man who really had no business doing something like this, to being a man who not only had a business doing something like this, but did it to show what was possible. And, you know, I had a guest on my show a few years back who was a Navy SEAL. His name was Mark Devine. And Mark taught me something. And he said that in the Navy SEALs, they teach you that you're capable of doing 20 times more than you think you can physically. So if you think you can only do 50 push-ups or press-ups, as you would call them in the UK, you can do 1,000. And that's something that always stuck with me when Raymond, you know, did this race. And I really pressed Raymond to go well past his comfort zones when I was his fitness coach. And I've always been fascinated by the fact that you know, were the person who inspired him to do this. And you rode across the Atlantic Ocean and you did all this amazing stuff with that, with your life. You were somebody who always said, why not? You're someone who did something incredible with your son and got closer to him as a result. And you're somebody who, you know, did something that most people will look at and they'll just recoil and go, oh my God, I could never do something like that. But it's the very audacity to believe that you can and to say, why not? And to go for it, that makes you a bigger, better person, that allows you to achieve more than you ever dreamed possible. Bravo, bravo.
I did get my own back because 10 years later, I met somebody who told me about the man who took out the book, whether I would last 2 weeks, etc. Sat at a dinner and he said, oh, hello, Jan, very embarrassed. I said, what are you doing these days? I'm organizing the hardest race in the world, 400 miles to the magnetic pole. I rang up Daniel and said, how about a bit of skiing at Easter? Mother. And when I told him, what about it? Mother and son race to the North Pole. The family answer, of course, was, why not? Why not? Raymond taught me was to speak. He said to me, I know you can speak, and I want you to come to Lake Louise and speak at my conference. So what he did is he gave me a goal. I was speaking to little groups and little mothers' Sundays and to schools. But by the time I got to Lake Louise, I was a speaker. And what's lovely is he got me in the Chicken Soup book, Chicken Soup for the Ocean Lover's Soul. And at the back, they said, and this spurred me on until now, Jan's life reads like the plot of a novel. She's too busy living it to write it. Well, you know something? I wrote it because too busy living it to write it until lockdown. And I've nearly finished it. Nearly finished it.
So was it Jacques Richard who bet against you?
Yes, did you meet him? Yes, he came over too.
I met him. So listen, Raymond has connected me with him, but if you can connect me with him as well, I'd love to have him on the show, man. This is a fellow who's got to be on the show. My goodness.
Yeah, I'll introduce you to him. We're great friends. Great friends.
That's
In
awesome.
spite of, I don't know that he actually took that book out, but I would say he did because people think it's funny to think that.
Yeah, it's a good story. When
I said to him, my son says, never let the truth stand in the way of a good story.
Your son's right. Your son's right. That's brilliant.
But what I'd said to him was, do you think, when he told me about the race, do you think I can do it, Jock? He said, for goodness sake, woman, you rode the Atlantic.
There you go. Of course you can. For goodness sake, woman. I love it.
Daniel, when I said to Daniel how all the ones going to the pole were much kinder to me, nobody took out any books or anything. And Daniel's reply was, you know why, mother? With you in my team, no, they know they'll never come last. And the thing is, I was never racing against people. I was racing against myself and against my fears. And when I got to that North Pole, it wasn't because I got to the North Pole. It's because I'd overcome the discomfort, the fear, and the cold. That's what I was proud about, and did it with my son.
I got to tell you, I think that's spectacular. It's an incredible thing that you and your son achieved together. Bravo.
We had a third adventure. Daniel decided to go into politics. He had nothing to do with politics. I'd been a town mayor and a town councillor. And he asked me if I would be his agent. Now, I've never been an agent, but I thought I can learn. So what happened is we turned over a 9,000 vote of Daniel was a Conservative, this man was Labour. He'd been 18 years in that seat. He'd been a minister and he was considered unbeatable. I went up to Daniel's area. We got a team together and this chap kept saying, Daniel Biles has got his mother as his agent. Well, we got in on the third recount at 6 a.m. with 52 votes. It was enough. It was enough. So we came last in the Atlantic. We came last at the pole, but he climbed the slippery slope of Westminster and he became a member of Parliament. So that was great.
That's incredible. Is he still in politics?
No, because his constituency was going to be ruined by our high-speed rail. And so Daniel was voting against it, vociferously fighting against it. And unfortunately, when you fight against your government, you never get promotion. So he did 5 years, very good years. He picked his successor and helped him gain a seat. And he's now doing very well. Because those 5 years gave him a great lot of contacts, as you can imagine. And he'll always do good, Daniel, from a little boy. I mean, I tell you the difference between my children. My daughter was born a week late, so I had an extra week's pregnancy, and Daniel was born a week early because he couldn't wait to get here.
He was in a hurry. Attaboy. Wow, incredible. So you and your son have shared 3 spectacular adventures. And I tell you, I think what you've done is absolutely marvelous, Jan. You know, deciding to go out and row across the Atlantic Ocean and being the oldest woman to do it, deciding to go and do the world's toughest race, running to the North Pole, being the oldest person.
I always get the oldest. Guinness are now dusting down another record because in 24, I am planning to take 6 women on an expedition to the South Pole. Oh. I will be 80. And I've got 6 women, 2 from India, 1 from Ireland, age 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and me. And we were going to do it just before lockdown. And of course, there were no flights to Antarctica. So put it on ice, which is rather good. And then I need a lot of money for it. I need about £500,000. And I didn't think this year, straight after lockdown, was the right time. But my book hopefully will come out. And I have a lot of very interesting plans to raise the money. And I will then, and Guinness is great. I rang him up and he said, well, Jan, I'll get the frame down and make sure it's dusted out because it'll be another oldest. Wow, I'm afraid I'm always the oldest.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. You know, my better half, her name's Teresa Degwell. She decided to set some Guinness World Records. She's a runner. So she ran 12 hours on a treadmill 3 times and she set 3 Guinness World Records. For doing so. And she ran the greatest distance on a treadmill over 12 hours. And she inspired a group of women, 12 of them, to do an hour each and set a record that way. So, you know, I should connect you and Teresa. I think you and Teresa ought to chat. She's always looking for the next thing to do.
Oh, yes.
I think she might be into what you ladies
and I have a lot
doing.
Of fun now because writing the book has been fun because I had to go back in my memory and I got a co-writer who's a professional journalist and we love each other. We've spoken for 2 years, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and he gets memories out of it. but I didn't think I had. And I've got in touch with people. I got in touch with the two boats that met us when we crossed the line of longitude, Sable Road Atlantic. And everybody, right from way back, said, "Oh, God, Jan, so great to speak to you." I've even got a young man who, when in 1965, had a crush on me in the film business, because I worked for Sammy Davis Junior, I worked for Roger Moore, I worked for Olivia de Havilland. So I've had another life there.
What?
Yes. I mean, lots of different things. And he rang me up last week saying, "Hello, Jan." He says, "I understand you're writing a book. We must have lunch." So I'm meeting this guy. I haven't met him since 1969 to discuss bits and pieces about my time with him in the film business. Isn't that fun?
That's incredible. So hold on a second. You can't just throw that out there and just walk away from that. You knew Sammy Davis Jr. and Roger Moore. So tell me about that.
Right. Well, what happened? That was my first good why not. I lived in a place called Bournemouth Elstree, which is the Hollywood of England. And everyone wanted to work at the studios. And it was nepotism. They never advertised the jobs. And one day I left a job, which was very hard in those days. You never like to leave a job without another one. But the boss was such an unpleasant man. So it was November, and I'm walking past his agency, and there's a job advertised in the studios for a man called Johnny Goodman. So 5 o'clock it was. So I went in, and they said, "Well, it closes in half an hour. You can't possibly go and look at you." And I said, "An ordinary, why not?" Well, in those days, when you went for a job, you went in a navy suit with a white blouse and white gloves. And I had my going around shopping clothes on. So I thought, why not? So I ran down and I got to the studios at 5:15. And Mr. Goodman was down on the stage. So somebody gave me a cigarette. I don't smoke anymore. So I walked in with a cup of tea, a cigarette, and the wrong clothes. And I got the job. "Jan," he said, "I'd seen about 45 women in navy suits. You were a breath of fresh air." And that gave me years in there. And first job, with Mr. Goodman, Johnny, my office was next door to Roger Moore's dressing room. And on the first day he came in, I don't know if you could see this, and he raised his eyebrow and said, "Hello, Jan, is Johnny there?" And that's what he does. That was his signature. And I put mine up and said, "Who shall I say it is?" From that moment on, we were great friends, and he used to pop his head in every morning. We had lunch together, and he was married to a very, very jealous lady called Louisa Mattioli, and we used to flirt. And one day he said, "Oh, Jan," he said, "it's raining. I'd take you home, only Louisa's collecting me." And I patted his knee and said, "Yes, Roger, that's why." And we just stayed with friends. And I had 3 years working. I worked for Stuart Damon, who was at General Hospital. That was, I worked with him. He was in a thing called Partners. Anyway, or was that one? Yeah, no, he was in the Champions. Anyway, I worked on television series, and then my first film was directed by Jerry Lewis, of Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis, and Sammy Davis Jr. and Peter Lawford was starring in it, and I had a most incredible time. And Sammy and I became very, very good friends indeed. And I went on later. My last film, when I was pregnant with my daughter, Olivia de Havilland was in it. I mean, can you imagine? My hero from way back. So I really I have a talk I did on a cruise, and it's called "Going to Work Was Fun." And it was well paid and fun. And then I obviously had my children. I went to Chip and Norton. I became the town mayor, the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce, and life just completely changed for me. And now I speak all over the place. I've spoken, as you know, in Canada. I've spoken in Oman. I've spoken in Holland, and I've spoken to 900 schools. And I thought children would think I was too old, and they don't. These little boys of 9 say, because I'm small and a grandma, "Jan, if you can do it, perhaps we can." And I get emails from little boys saying, whenever I'm a bit frightened of doing something, I think, why not? Isn't that lovely?
That is absolutely lovely.
Yeah, I don't get paid so much from the schools, but I come away always as inspired by these children as I know I inspire them. And probably that's the happiest talks I have. I go all dressed up in my gear. I let them try on the boots. I take the sledge, and they come up with some wonderful questions. Wonderful questions. Jan, and you know why I'm going to the South Pole?
Tell me.
Because one of their main questions is, which is the most difficult? Which is the most beautiful? North or south? And I want to be able to say, I'll be telling you.
So Jan, what you've done is incredible. You've had a life well lived. You've had beautiful children, which is incredible. You worked with
5 grandchildren.
That's even more fantastic, as they say. You've had a life where you've got to meet some of, Hollywood's greatest and biggest stars from back in the day when being a Hollywood star meant something, and hopefully there'll be a time it'll mean something again. But the stars of that era, Sammy Davis Junior, Olivia de Havilland, Roger Moore, they're absolutely incredible. I had a guest on my show. His name's Tom Dreesen, and Tom was on tour for 14 years with the great Frank Sinatra, and he told us a whole bunch of stories of Frank's time with Sammy Davis Jr. And it was just really incredible to have him on the podcast and have him be speaking about these things. Tom's a great man.
Peter Lawford. I must tell you one lovely story about Peter.
Please,
he was so laid back. He was horizontal, and he called Sammy Super Spade. He called Jerry Super Jew. He called the producer Super Crap. And I said to him one day, God, I dread to think what you'd call me. And he said, I'll give it some thought over the weekend. And I thought, oh God, what have I done? What have I done? Monday morning, he called everybody around. He said, I've got the name for Jan. Just Super. Did me no harm. Did me no harm at all. And luckily for me, he was very tied up with a very beautiful girl, so I didn't have to, sort of fight for my honor in return for it.
Oh, good for you. I mean,
and my book. Shall I tell you the title of my book?
Please do. Tell me about your book.
Well, it is a memoir. I'm not going to put in like everything you've done. It's a memoir, and as I've done it, I've met wonderful people in my life, as you do with your podcast. So when I've met these people, I give them their due, and I give stories about them, because I think just me, although my life's been exciting, having some of these people in it too. And I had some incredible adventures with Sammy, which you will have to read the book to get. And so I've really enjoyed it because it's brought other people back into my life. It's reminded me of the wonderful things that they have done. And I'm calling it Meek and Wild.
Nice.
I think it's a great title.
It really is. Well done. I'll tell you this. Anyone listening to this show would be very, very lucky indeed to have the chance to read your book and to make your acquaintance that way. And I can't wait till your book comes out. So get on it, as they say.
As Raymond would say, he's really angry with me. He says I should have written it 20 years ago. But actually, I've done so much more since Rowan Atlantic. I'm glad I've waited.
Yeah, good for you. So now's the time to get the book out. And when it is officially out, come back on the show and we'll have you tell all the stories from the book and promote it and all that good stuff. I think it's fantastic that you've been able to build yourself a brand. We say that there's a distinction between an expert and a thought leader. And an expert is someone who knows something. A thought leader is someone who's known for knowing something. Well, you're known for knowing how to say why not and to set Guinness World Records doing incredible things. And that has allowed you to be a sought after speaker and build quite a tidy little business for yourself in that regard. So bravo and kudos. So we like to ask you as our guest expert, what are your top 3 expert action steps? I kind of stole this from Raymond. So these are your best 3 pieces of advice that you recommend my listener take on to take their business and their life to the next level. So what do you say?
Well, the first one is always to say, why not? And to have confidence in yourself and think, look, you're never too young, too old, too fat, too thin. If you want to do it, go for it. And 3 things will happen then. Either you'll do it and think, oh my gosh, I managed it. Or you won't do it. You'll think, I know how to do it next time. Or you'll think, that's not for me. I'm going to have to move on to something else. But you know for sure that it's not for you. And I think that's recognizing that, saying why not, and then realizing the very good things that come out of that. And it gives me such confidence. I mean, I will be 80. And the only way I'm going to be able to prove to the insurance companies that I can get to the South Pole, because they're all going to say, I'm going to take my 6 girls. We want to do 101 miles to the South Pole because I did 101 days across the Atlantic. So I'm going to take us on a harder 101 miles, either in Greenland or somewhere that's harder and more difficult, so that I can say to the insurance company, we've just done a rehearsal and we managed fine. So I think always making sure that you covered your own back, because obviously I'm going to have to raise £500,000. And if my sponsors know that I'm already done, almost done it, because in actual fact, the South Pole, it's very emotive, but it's not necessarily harder or more arduous than Greenland or Alaska or anywhere in the middle of the winter. So, and I have a wonderful team. I call us the Polar Maidens, and we're always in touch, and we just all get on so well. And I've brought in some medics who are so fascinated that they're going to put us in a chamber before we go and measure all the things about us. And then when we come back, to see how the different ages cope with all the hardship and mental things, which I think will be makes it a little more than just a jolly.
Okay, fantastic. So if folks want to, find out more about the things you're doing, get a hold of you, if they're interested in helping sponsor some of your work, what's the best way for them to, or they want to hire you to speak for them, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Well, there's my webpage, which you can give them, can't you? I think I gave it to you, my webpage. So
say it again.
It's www.polar-maidens.net.
Okay, great.
And if you put Jan Meek Polar Maiden, it'll come up. And it's not quite up to date at the moment, but I also do an amusing thing. Every week I put on a dress called Posh Friday, and I have a little chat about. I have so many different clothes, it's not true. So it's quite a fun thing to follow, because every week you've got me in a different dress. Because I haven't changed shape for years, and because I've been the mayor and I speak at conferences, and my mother had beautiful dresses and we were the same size, since the beginning of lockdown, I have not repeated a dress. So ladies will enjoy that. It's quite fun.
Awesome. Yeah, I've seen that on Facebook. I've seen you put your posh frocks on. That's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
So, listener, Jan Meek is a legend, is a multiple Guinness World Record holder, and a very inspiring woman. And she and her philosophy of why not are something you ought to take on in your life. Why not indeed? Why not have you live your life in the best way possible? Why not make a ton of money? Why not do that thing you've always wanted to do, but you've put off because you've got this nagging, chattering monkey in the back of your head saying you can't do it? Why not indeed? So today, that's the plan. Why not? I had another guest come on and he shared the can you imagine, which is another way of saying why not? Can you imagine blah, blah, blah? Can you imagine racing to the South Pole? Can you imagine living life as the best version of yourself? Can you imagine making $1 million in a single month? That sort of thing. And why not is another way of saying that. And I absolutely love it. So we're going to make sure, listener, that all this information is in the show notes. Get a hold of Jan, follow her work, contribute to what she's trying to do. And if you are somebody who really enjoyed this particular episode, do me a favor, share it with somebody else who will enjoy it too. Because I'm going to tell you, that is what makes the biggest difference in the world when you share all this. All right. Jan, it's been a real pleasure to have you here on the show, and can't wait to have you back when your book's out.
Absolutely. Try and stop me. Also, I can come and give a chat, can't I? We'll have a book launch. I
love it. Let's do that. Let's make sure that we do that. And I'm looking forward to it. And that wraps up another exciting episode of the podcast, The Thought Leader Revolution. To find out more about today's incredible guest, the one and only Jan Meek, go to the show notes at thethoughtleaderrevolution.com or on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Audible, Google Play, or wherever else you happen to listen to this episode. Until next time, goodbye.
This episode has been brought to you by eCircleAcademy.com, the proven system to add 6 to 7 figures a year to your thought leader practice.